Bringing this back to you, after all these years, what's still keeping you in the space?
I don't have the same day twice. And I think that is one of the things, as hard as it might seem, it's actually really hard to spend money when you want to spend it appropriately and effectively. People often go, "Do you work for the city?" And I'm like, no, I help people work with the city.
We've tried to adopt technology, but it has failed. And we've resorted back to doing things manually. If I was having a conversation with you, what advice would you give me in terms of how to move forward?
So I think the most important thing is to be open to trying new things. So I think what's most successful is when people are keeping that why not attitude.
What advice would you give someone who's aspiring to, run a bid in the future?
And we have managed over the last 4 years to increase the portion of our budget basically from 0 to about 24% of our budget is now grants. To be really clear about what you want. And if you don't know what you want, then you need to take a step back.
But anytime a leader is willing to get into the details and cares about, spending that time to make sure it's successful, we've seen adoption really skyrocket. Erin, thank you for doing this. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Just to set some context, the audience we're speaking to, these are UPMO space leaders like yourself. These are operational folks within UPMOs. These are solution providers and service providers within that space, and other stakeholders that are within the space. And so I don't want this to be hey, what's a BIA sort of conversation, right? I'd love for this to go one level deeper and really, have this group or leave this with a bunch of takeaways for this set of people. So with that said, I want to first start off with you. You've been in this space for 12 plus years at this point. You started SODO back in 2014. And I'd like to first understand what brought you into the UPMO space. Tell us about the journey of how you found yourself here.
Well, I kind of fell into it in a sort of a unique way. I came in through events and through the chamber world. I was a large event specialist in a resort area. I ran a chamber in Eastern Washington where we did events from large balloon festivals and parades, and moved back to the Seattle area and took a position at the University District Chamber of Commerce running the U-District Street Fair, which at the time was the longest running street fair. It was over 50 years old. Several 100,000 people come for days of, music and art and crafts and food. And within the first week of my being there, the executive director left for health reasons, the accountant retired, the bookkeeper had a baby, and suddenly I'm the interim director of the chamber, and there's this little thing called a BIA. And I didn't know what it was, but all of a sudden I'm running it. And I really became a true believer in this process. It's so different than what I had experienced with the chamber. In the chamber that I ran, most of what we did was events and out-of-district marketing. And only about 65% of the businesses were members. But 100% benefited from what we did. But here, when the BIA model or the bid model or whatever model, was, everybody paid, and they paid equitably. And so it really created a more community feel and the ability of stability. I knew what the funds were going to be, as opposed to a voluntary membership organization where you're having to go out and spend a significant amount of staff time chasing down memberships. That continuity of time and energy. And so after about 2 years at that chamber, the U-District Chamber, the SODO position came up, and it was the initial founding position, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity. And I've now been the director in SODO for about 11 years.
So back then, when you started SODO, was it just you, or did you have a small team back then itself?
So when I started SODO, so it was started by the board of directors, but there was no staff, there was no office, there was no computer, there was no documents. I mean, it existed, but largely on paper. So I had to come in and do the paperwork, file the nonprofit paperwork, set up the structure so that it could operate. And then over time, in the beginning, it was me going door to door and talking to businesses saying, hey, we're here to
Wow.
help you. This is what we can do. And we did hire first a part-time admin, and then, Lauren Lundberg, who is our deputy director now, was our first program hire, and as a clean and safe program manager, and back in 2018. And that was a big kind of leap of faith because we were much smaller budget then. We hadn't done our expansion, and really it was the board buying into the fact that we could be bigger and better. And in 2019, we expanded to our current boundaries, which is much bigger.
Yeah.
And we now have a full-time staff of 7 plus a contract staff for our clean and safe ambassadors.
When you started, what was the budget for?
$565,000 a year.
Wow. Actually, that's not too bad, right? For a initial BIA?
It's not. It's
Yeah.
pretty small. But, our initial authorization was only 5 years. But the fun part of it was that they started in January, but I didn't start until December, and they hadn't spent any money. So I had only 4 years to prove value before we started to have to reauthorize
Yeah.
again. So which was really 3 years because you need a year to reauthorize. So we really had to hit the ground running to show value. And as hard as it might seem, it's actually really hard to spend money when you want to spend it appropriately and effectively. And, I remember sitting at a board meeting and we were like kind of spitballing ideas of like, what kinds of things could we do to show value in the neighborhood? And one of my board members was like, let's do street sweeping and we'll sweep the streets. And we did, but it was only like $1,500 a time. And so it doesn't cost that much,
Yeah.
And so we really had to really do a lot in those first years to get to the point we are now.
Bringing this back to you, after all these years, what's still keeping you in the space?
I don't have the same day twice. And I think that is one of the things that I so like about this. I had this conversation with the team recently. I could bring out any speech that I've given over the years, and the issues are still the same. But are we a collection of our issues, or are we the people? And I know that I have helped people every single day, and I get to do things that I wouldn't be able to do in a job where I sat at a desk and fixed something or did some sort of gizmo. And so this is a profession where you're out, you're talking to people, you're helping them at a time when they really need it. And then you're off to doing something else. It's kind of everything in the kitchen sink. You might be meeting with the mayor and all fancy, and then you might be literally in jeans and an orange vest directing traffic for the NFC division game. And that was just when I was doing in 1 week. And I think that appeals to my I'm a high energy person. I like to do different things. And so I think that is part of it, is it allows me to use kind of all sides of my brain, all sides of my interests.
You made the point that some of the issues that were there in 2014 still exist today. And so when you look at the impact that SODO BIA has made, according to you, what's progress? What's progress in this world?
Progress is that our businesses don't feel abandoned. They feel like they have someone to call when they need help. And when I say the problems are still there, I don't mean the specific issue. I mean the more general issues. I mean, the unsheltered crisis on the streets of Seattle continues. The substance use crisis on the streets of Seattle continues. But does the individual that was causing problems for this business, well, we've probably resolved that particular individual. But the overarching problem still exists. And I think more than anything, we exist so that their businesses can call us, and then we can do all of the other things. If it's a parking problem, then we work with the Department of Transportation. If it's a police issue, then we'll deal with it, so that they only have to make one call, and then they can go back to focusing on running their business. And so that is what success looks like for me, is that they feel like they are supported and that they're not having to go through layer after layer after layer of bureaucracy to get something done that we know how to do.
When you speak about this, for me, SODO looks less like coming from a point of advocacy and more so like a city operator.
I often say, people often go, do you work for the city? And I'm like, no, I help people work with the city. And that's sort of how we feel. And, given the way that we're created by the city, it goes both ways. The city comes to us when they need to interact. If they're going to do a sewer project on a certain street, they'll come to us and say, hey, we need to talk to all the property owners on First Avenue South. Can you put together a meeting? So it actually goes both ways. And it's really an example of the public-private partnership aspect of a BIA, because we are created in Washington State by City Council ordinance. It is that back and forth between government and private entity that makes it work so well. We are the entity that the businesses can come to and that the government can come to talk to the businesses.
Something we've always realized, and we work with about 70 plus downtown districts today, and I've had a lot of conversations with leaders in the space. A lot of them talk about, they're very ambitious, right? They talk about, hey, we want to throw events like this, right? This is the future of how we want to operate. One theme that has been consistent with everything that you've put out there has been not really chasing the shiny object, but more so just saying, hey, the focus of SODO has always been making sure things scale, things operate smoothly, and you're doing the basics right. Is that how you think of it internally too?
Well, I think it's the unique thing about business improvement areas is that they're unique to the needs of who created them. And so we have a bridge that separates SODO from West Seattle. The West Seattle Junction Association is almost all events, because the businesses that created that association, that's what they wanted. And that's great, because that's what that business improvement area was created to do. That is not what we do, because that's not the needs of our business improvement area. We are there because we are an industrial area that happens to have two major public stadiums that have 4, sports teams that play there. We really spend a lot of time making sure that the impacts from that on our businesses, that they can continue to operate. We also have a major port, rail, and all sorts of other entertainment. I mean, our job is to make sure our neighborhood can function during these types of things. And we do events, but they're events for our businesses to meet other SODO folks, not really focused on bringing in people from outside of SODO.
So you're very deeply connected in the industry. And, obviously you work very closely with IDA as well. Just from your point of view, and when you look at some of the projects, some of the BIAs that are close to you, can you talk about give a couple of examples of, BIAs or projects that are being done well today? What certain BIAs are doing right?
I think one of the key elements about IDA that I love so much, and what is the right way to approach it, is the borrow or steal, the rip-off idea, because I don't know any other industry where, like, taking an idea you see from someone else is so encouraged. And that is what I love about this industry. And I look around and, my good friend Robbie Silver down in downtown San Francisco is doing that amazing light project. And that is great. I don't have any high-rise buildings. I couldn't quite steal that. So, we look at things and it's like, how would that work in my neighborhood? I don't know. But, we keep in touch with each other. We may only see each other at conferences, but it's great to hear what's working in their districts and learn for each other. So I think the most important thing is to be open to trying new things. So I think what's most successful is when people are keeping that why not attitude. It's really the why not, let's do it. And why not just put a bunch of art up on the side of a skyscraper? And that's when, another one that just popped into my head was down in the social district in LA. They were dealing with they have some residential areas, and they were dealing with a lot of dog waste, and they put in some dog parks with nice bag areas. And so why not have a mascot, with a dog and they now have a mascot. And, it's not something that you would necessarily think that a BIA would have a mascot, but it ended up being very popular. It comes to their events. They got some media attention for it. And I think it's that mindset, that why not, let's try it mindset, that is what makes you successful, because it takes you down pathways that are unexpected, and that's what draws people in.
The why not mindset, do you feel like that's being embraced a lot more these days, or you feel the industry has a little more to catch up to or need to embrace that a little more?
Oh, I think COVID pushed us really into that. I think we all came out of COVID with, okay, what are we going to do now? We had to change, all of a sudden the way we'd always done it didn't exist. And so I think we've seen a lot more, let's try something new. And I'm sure there's been a little bit of a new pattern that has been created. And, one of the things that some districts are dealing with is the very slow return to office in some areas. And that really struggles for downtown districts. You need people in your neighborhood for it to thrive. And so we don't want those new patterns to become ingrained.
My next question is more for an aspiring executive director of an up-and-coming business improvement district or a BIA. Because you mentioned how each BIA or bid is different from the other, what advice would you give someone who's aspiring to, run a bid in the future?
I think it's really important to listen. And I was speaking earlier about the fact that I am the executive director, and, I've been in this role a long time. So it sometimes looks like it's Erin's way, but I am very conscious that it's not my budget. It's not my money, that I am doing what I'm doing for the people we serve. And I think that that's really important when we get into this work is to remember why we do it. We are here because these businesses or properties or whoever pays your ratepayer decided to assess themselves for services. And you're here to serve them and to help them. And I think it's really important to keep that servant leader mindset when you go into this work and keep that at the forefront. It can be really easy because we do get to go to the flashy events and, all of that to feel like, wow, I'm queen of the world. And sometimes that's okay. But I think it's really important to remember why we do the work. I also think that it's really important to get out and talk to people. I have been in districts before where when I talk to them, they're like, oh, we send out a newsletter. I'm like, well, you go out and talk? No. And I'm like, you got to be out there. You've got to go out and look at the district from their point of view, see what they're seeing out their window. I can't stress enough how much I learn from and I still do it even though I don't do outreach. I really like to see a district from the point of view of that ratepayer or that ratepayer because it looks different from out my window.
I want to next talk about something that's very close to you, the clean and safe side. I think you've always led with how important it is, the safety side of things and, keeping your streets clean and all of that. Something we're working very closely with our customers is trying to get them to showcase impact. And it's pretty challenging because there are a lot of BIAs and they do a lot of work that's not often visible. But then you have to hold yourself accountable. You have to show impact. How do you look at that, right? What is, how do you bring it down to a short conversation? What are some of the metrics that you might be using? Sometimes it's narratives and stories that need to be told, but communicating the impact. How do you look at that?
I think there's two things that you look at. I mean, there's the obvious before and after photos, but honestly, I think the most valuable is the word of mouth. I mean, the number of times that people come up and tell me, I saw your guys. I saw your guys out there. And when we first started our clean team, and people understood that they could call and they'd come out and clean and they didn't have to pay them any extra money. I mean, they'd come back to the office with donuts, with food. It was people were so happy to have this service. I think that, we put the data in our newsletter and we put the number of blocks watched, and it's important data to include. And I don't know that it actually tells the story. Do you know what I mean? Like in my head, I'm like, okay, we pressure washed 300 block faces. Yeah. What does that mean to anyone? We do the video, but I really think you can see it. But what really is the story is when someone calls and we respond immediately. We answer the phone. They're out there that day. And it's that word of mouth is the value that we get. But we still have to tell the story. We do it by videos. We do it on our website. We do it through social media. We use all these normal, channels to get the word out. But the most powerful is from the voices of the people in our district, for sure.
Do you feel that is being appreciated? And what I'm talking about is the end of your report, the video that SODO did was pretty impactful. Do you feel like that's being appreciated, or sometimes do you wonder whether, those need to be communicated in a different?
There's no question that I think we're appreciated. I still think we struggle to make sure that everybody in our district knows we're here. We are a really large district and we're industrial. As you know, I started in the U district, which is a straight street with traditional shops where all their front doors are lined up next to each other and all their back doors are lined up next to each other and everybody knows each other. They're one big happy and dysfunctional business family.
Yeah.
But SODO is industrial, and they, these big lots where the doors may not be near each other, and this business may open at 4 and this business may open at 8. And, I spent the first year walking down a street and talking to people, and the first thing they'd say was, I'm sure it's just me, but this is my issue. And I'm like, well, I've heard that from the last 3 people on this street. Do you even know your neighbor? And they're like, no. And so one of the first things that we did was our business community events. And we've been doing these since 2014. They are networking, but very, very low key in terms of structure. Once a quarter, we pick a location in SODO, and not just an event space. Like, we've had it at a fabric store, we've had it at a construction office, and we bring the catering, and we just get people together. And it has been so popular that now, 11 years later, we continue to have really big crowds. And I get up about halfway through and speak no more than 3 minutes, and I'll speak, and then I invite our host to speak, and that's it. No more speaking. Like, it's just the opportunity for SODO folks to meet other SODO folks. And I think that has been really valuable. But no, I think people really appreciate that. And that's what helps them know what we do.
So one of the top issues that IDEA has identified this year for a lot of districts is membership growth. I think more and more a lot of districts are today looking at membership as an avenue for increasing funds and revenue, increasing engagement, and just developing connectivity with businesses around their parcel. You and me spoke a while earlier that it may not be the right fit for SODO. However, if you were talking to the other districts out there, when does membership make sense? And where do you sit on that? Do you feel like it's a natural next step for a lot of these BIs?
I do. I think part of the reason it's not a fit for us is that we do not have a very strict line between our property owners and our businesses, because we consider them both to be ratepayers. But in many BIAs, it is only the property owner that it serves on the board. And for businesses to get involved, the only model is a membership model. So it is an opportunity for them to engage in this organization. So it is definitely a viable model to engage the people that are actually, when you think about the property owners and the business owners should be wanting the same thing.
Yeah.
They should be wanting, the business owners are wanting more viability and vitality, and the property owners want their business owners to stay, so they want more business owner. So it's a way to engage the business owners in what the property owners in those situations where you have that more stringent property owner, situation. And we're unique. Most are more like that model. We have a little more flexibility in our ordinance.
Do you feel a membership model comes into play only for BIAs beyond a certain budget, or do you think that has nothing to do with it?
I would, that's my hunch, but I would bet the minute I say that, there's going to be a smaller one that raises their hand and said, but we do it. So, I am sure there's the exception that disproves that. I think that it's what that unique needs of that community are.
Yeah.
I know that there's a neighborhood just to the south of us that consistently people come to our events, and we don't charge for our events. So people come to our networking events and there's no charge. And it's something that we're actually starting to look at, like, do we charge? And that is a question where maybe we might actually think about a membership model, because they're like, how do we become a part of you? I'm like, we don't have any possibility for that. But they're just 3 blocks south of our borders. So I could see something like there's an auxiliary. I think there is a vehicle for that so that people could participate in some way.
With a lot of BIAs, if membership is not the avenue for them to increase funding, increase engagement, what would you say besides the budget that comes from tax assessments?
I think there's two things that people do. One is grants, government grants and private foundation grants, and the other is sponsorships, specifically for BIAs that do events. There are all manner of sponsorships, corporate sponsorships for events. So we don't do events, so we do grants. And we have managed over the last 4 years to increase the portion of our budget basically from 0 to about 24% of our budget is now grants.
What's working with how you're able to do that?
Well, you have to focus on the right things. So we're really focused on some transportation, green economy items. It's really a full team effort. I literally have like 6 of my team members focused on grants. We work on it all together. We examine, like, we have a plan going in. Diversity of sources. We're not just putting all of our eggs in one basket. And there's also an element of we have successfully implemented grants, so we have a reputation. So we have received grants that other entities had received but not successfully fulfilled, and the granting entity had money that needed to be put out before the end of the year, and they're like, hey, can you work with this? And so as our reputation has built, we've actually had some that came to us relatively easily because of that reputation for being able to put the money in very quickly. So we will do what we can. I mean, we're pretty creative and can work pretty quickly.
Yeah, I definitely feel SODO has done well there, and I think it comes from, as you put it, a lot of the focus needs to be in the right places. When you, from a funding standpoint, so we spoke about memberships, we spoke about potentially events, grants, any other avenues you'd say?
So we are a 501c4, but we recently started a 501c3 supporting so that we can receive donations. We do run some of our grants through there because some grants are restricted to C3s. It's when I say we recently, I mean, I think we got our IRS designation in November. So this is a very new avenue, but it allows us to have a foundation that we can start to explore additional funding options. And that is something that we are looking at. We are also looking at some contracting with this, with government based on some work that's coming through, some infrastructure work that's going to be highly disruptive in our area and will reduce our assessment value because they will be purchasing properties. And so we're looking at some mitigation fund contracting. So it's not a grant per se. So those are some unique situations, but we're really at the point where we're going to ask for the sun and see what we can get.
Yeah. I want to bring one more perspective from my side.
Sure.
From where we are, BIAs are being asked to do more with either the same funding or lesser funding, which means productivity, they're expecting the team members to operate a much higher level of productivity. I firmly believe technology and data are sort of the ways to get there. But we've worked with customers who've adopted technology really, really well. And there's been the set that have struggled to adopt good technology, sometimes blaming technology as well. And I think it's fair to look at it through that lens of not just being sold on, hey, here's shiny new technology that's going to completely solve all of your problems, because we know that it's only as good as the people who are using it. Would love to get your views on technology, when you think it really works well, and what are some pitfalls for other BIAs you'd caution them against?
Yeah. Yeah, what did I always say? I love my computer until it stops working and then I want to throw it out the window. No, absolutely technology is essential to what we do. Data is essential to what we do. And the challenge that I think a lot of us fall into is that we never get a chance to stop doing what we're doing enough to do the data, and finding the time. I mean, I remember when we were doing our first CRM, and Lauren and I literally had a stack of papers by our desk of all the handwritten notes that we needed to input
Oh my
into our
God.
CRM. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. I mean, yes, we were doing the work, and yes, eventually it was going to get in the CRM, but it was on paper. And which is one of the reasons we were very excited to be able to at least have, integrations that would do that. And I also know that sometimes there's capabilities in programs that I use that I might use 70% and be okay with that. It's trying to figure out like what works to make it better and where is getting it all the way there going to be too much of a hassle. Does that make sense? Because most of the BIAs at my size don't have a dedicated IT team.
Yeah.
We have external. We don't have that data manager. And so we're trying to all be that person. And one of the things I know that I've needed is like, how are we integrated? That person, like a chief technology officer, it's like, I have somebody who fixes it when it's broken, but do I have the person who says you have all the right things? And that is that piece that, BIAs are so often busy doing that we don't often have the time thinking. And every time I'm at IDA conference, we go into a room and we have our executive director session. And I swear this is a topic every single
Yeah.
session. And every single session, I'm like, I am going to schedule thinking time. And I try, but you get pulled in so many different directions that it can be hard sometimes.
So if I was at a BIA and we're still operating on spreadsheets and a lot of manual work, and we've tried to adopt technology, but it has failed, and we've resorted back to doing things manually. If I was having a conversation with you, what advice would you give me in terms of how to move forward? Just coming from a place where I've already burnt my fingers.
Well, I would certainly tell them that they should move forward. I did, actually. I've done that in the last 6 months to someone. But that one of the things that I would say is to be really clear about what you want. And if you don't know what you want, then you need to take a step back. And that is where you need to think about the questions you want this to answer. And if you can't answer what questions, like how are you going to use this, then you're not ready to tell them how to build it.
Yeah.
And that is where you got to be really clear. And if you're not really clear in your head, then you're not going to give really clear directions. And that's where it gets mixed up. And that's where, as I said, I feel like we didn't give clear directions because we weren't clear in what we gave. And so I think it's really important that you're really clear about what you want it to say and what questions it's supposed to answer.
I think something I'll add to what you're saying is the projects we've seen that have really been successful, it's usually because leadership has poured a lot of energy into it. Not just at the time of purchase, saying, hey, we go buy this and then give it to that team to run with. But anytime a leader is willing to get into the details and cares about, spending that time to make sure it's successful, we've seen adoption really skyrocket, right? And I think, again, just going back to this, being clear about, what you really want, and then putting some energy into the actual adoption and the implementation of the technology, I think becomes key.
I absolutely agree.
And would you say at SODO, just from a team standpoint, has adoption always been easy to do?
We rolled ours out the second week in January, so let me get back to you on that one.
Awesome. So I think if I can ask you for some bold or, just your views on up and coming trends, where do you see the space in the next couple of years? Are we still going to see the same kinds of problems, or are we going to move the needle on some of these things pretty significantly? Just, broad thoughts.
Well, I do think that we are seeing that's going to areas they've never been in before, like a lot more urban planning and in a deeper way than just placemaking, like actual place design. I do think that the affordability crisis is not going anywhere. I think that our downtowns are recovering. I don't think that the downtown is dead peel that we heard right after COVID. I think that has proven, but they're changing, and what that's going to look like is largely going to depend on the organizations that make downtowns. I mean, I think we're seeing a lot more residential, and that didn't just happen. That was done unintentionally. And so I think that will continue. But I think you said it before, we're being asked to do a lot more than we ever were. And there are some times I'm like, wait, am I the city? No, I'm not the city. Should I be doing this? Oh, well, and I feel like if there's a space, we need to fill it, because right now the needs are great. And we want to make sure that our folks, our businesses, our ratepayers, our stakeholders are successful. And because that is what is going to bring in more business, more support, and ultimately make the city as a whole better and the industry better. So it is this sort of, compounding situation. So it's, again, the industry. We all make each other better, our neighborhoods better. I mean, I work with 11 other BIAs in Seattle, and we're a cohort. And then we have other BIAs in the state, and we're a cohort. And we all learn from each other and support each other. And then we go to IDA, and then there's thousands more where we all learn from each other and support each other. And I don't know any other industry that is as like, sure, here's my idea, I'll send you all the plans.
Yeah.
Instead of, don't look at what I'm doing, you might steal my idea. No, this is a sharing industry, because we all win when we're successful.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because majority of our customers come from referrals, right? So we often have our customers going to other BIAs and saying, hey, you got to work with District360. They could be really helpful.
Well, and I, when I was doing the implementation and getting stuck, it was your other customers who let me into their systems to poke around and be like, oh, I see how that works. Totally opened up their CRMs and let me look at the structure to see how it worked. And then it made sense. And that was sort of what got us over some of the challenges we were dealing with. Can you imagine a bank letting another bank into their CRM? Never going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
Erin, thank you so much for your time. I think, it's amazing to read about and learn about the impact you're making at SODO. We look forward to having you again sometime in the future again. But again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been awesome to be here in Chennai and to meet everyone. So thank you very much.
Awesome.